Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Iron Culture podcast presented by the Mass Research Review. I am Eric Trexler, joined by the Dr. Eric Helms. Helms, how are we doing tonight?
Hey, I can actually say that tonight, almost. It's like late afternoon. Do you think 4 p.m. is evening or afternoon? That's a
Well,
litmus test right there.
4 p.m. in the fall after the clocks change, it's going to be dark in an hour, so you can call that evening. It's going to be dark in 2 hours.
Yeah, no, here in Cali, it's dark right around 5, a
Okay.
little bit after 5.
All right.
So I think for the first time, I can say that this Monday evening, just like you, I'm doing well.
Nice. So, Helms, we see the all the photographs behind you. Clearly, a nostalgic setting for you as you're back in your old stomping grounds, competing on the stage that you've observed so many fine competitors share in the past. So, why don't you give us, just to start out here, a little recap of how the week went? You know, we kind of previewed you're going to be up on stage with your colleagues, a big show, a return to, like I said, the old stomping grounds. So, take us through the competition, the non-competition, the nostalgia, what it's like to be home among friends. Just give us all of it to get us started here.
Yeah, man, it's definitely been a time of reflection, which I really appreciate and gratitude because I think, as you know, contest prep kind of turns people into human doings rather than human beings in many ways, and you just kind of focus on one foot in front of the other. And if you don't have the right mindset, you can just let it all pass by and not actually stop and smell the proverbial roses or the protan or dream tan in this case. Actually, it wasn't either, but yeah. So for context, pictures behind me. I'm actually in my cousin's room at my uncle's house, and yeah, in the greater area where I went to high school. Um, and I have been to what is now known as the California Muscle Mayhem. I have either watched it via distance, attended it, had an athlete in it, or competed in it every year since 2007 that it's happened. So that's pretty cool. And when I first watched it in 2007, it was after my first season, and I was going, "Oh, that's the stage where like the legit people go." And at that time, it wasn't even yet a pro-am; it was a pro qualifier. In 2010, the at the time it was actually still called the Cap City. I think that's when it became the Muscle Mayhem. It became a pro-am. And I was telling you before we started recording, I watched a five-way battle between five world champions across various different divisions. This was around that time where the IFPA was at its peak, and there was some flux, and there was a brief period where the Cap City changed sanctions from the INBF to the IFPA. And when it came back to the INBF, it was actually because Bob and Tina, the longtime show promoters who run this awesome show, actually became part of the leadership team at the WNBF. So anyway, I watched in the pro bodybuilding division Kiyoshi Moody, Philip Ricardo Jr., Cleveland Thomas, Moji Alua, and Panix Pierre, who are between them. There are multiple overall IFPA Yorton Cup wins, WNBF Worlds, Team Universe, Natural Olympias, and many of them. Some of them are like six-time winners of some of those shows. And it was just basically a toss-up between the top four out of them at least. I think it ended up going Philip Ricardo Jr., Kiyoshi Moody, Cleveland Thomas, Panix Pierre, Moji Alua. But honestly, those guys are each one of them is world class. And so I think of that stage at the pro level is like playing baseball at Wrigley Field or Yankee Stadium or Fenway. Um, and Berto, to his credit, Alberto Nunez, who I got to compete with for the first time since 2007, our first show, um, on the pro stage at this show, he got his pro card there in 2008, which is something that's pretty laudable. And it's no surprise that he would go on to have now won multiple pro shows on the natural circuit, which is a huge feat. And probably his most notable win is the 2022 WNBF Universe, which is one of the top titles and one of the most competitive shows. So he was on this pro stage, not his first time. It's my first time competing as a pro, and we had a really awesome top four. So I think I in the preview I mentioned how Sam Okanola is IPE and WNBF world champ. He was there. Um, Sergio Blanco, who is the national champion from Spain and third place finisher at last year's Worlds in the lightweights, as well as Eddie Saldana, who has not lost a show that he's done this season. He's done, I think, an NPC natural show, an ANBF pro show, and now, not to, spoil the plot, he just won this overall. And I wouldn't say a blowout, but convincing. And I think Berto would agree. Berto placed second. Sergio placed third, and then Sam placed fourth, which tells you something about the caliber of the show. I ended up placing sixth in this lineup out of nine, and that is something that I'm very proud of because this was a stacked pro class, and they had us up there for a long time. And I'm very confident in saying two things. Um, I did not get to the same level as those top four, but I did belong on the same stage with those guys. Having looked at the pictures, saw where I was placed in terms of the call outs, and it was a really, really awesome moment, man, to get to. It's, I've always wanted to get dunked on by Jordan and take pictures, and I feel like I might have actually like guarded him for a second before he, broke my ankles and got the and one. So it was a really, really, really cool experience. Very well ran show, and Brad Loomis, who competed in the over 50s, he won the Masters, the Grand Masters, I should say, title now again. It's actually the second time he's won it there. So he got amateur qualification of Worlds, and he's going to see if he can be the best over 50 bodybuilder in the amateur Worlds, which is really cool in 2 weeks. Berto and I are going to compete in the pro men's bodybuilding in 2 weeks again. I'm trying to get a little bit leaner to see if we can do that with the wheels falling off. And Jeff Alberts was the real MVP. He coached, I think, 9 athletes who were physically present there, and then 2 online who were at another show on that day. And he provided support for even more of that because we had, Brian Miner had an athlete, Alberto had an athlete, and Brad had several others the day he was competing. So because this is the town, the greater Sacramento area is basically where, I should say NorCal in general, it's where 3DMJ formed. We typically have up to at least a dozen athletes in the show, up to sometimes 2 dozen. So this was somewhere in the middle there, like 15, 16. And it was an awesome day. Just a lot of really, really nostalgic moments, people I've seen for years, expediters I've known for a decade. And yeah, I peaked well. Things went really well, and it was just a lot of fun, which is the most important thing. So yeah, I really, really can't complain, man. And I went out to some spots that I haven't. I sat on a rock that I haven't sat on in 25 years, Trex, down by, I guess it's technically Natomas Lake, but it's like an extension of the American River. And it was a beautiful day. It doesn't feel like November. I know I'm from California, but the more north you go, the less it's like LA weather.
Yeah.
It is typically, I would say, about 10 degrees colder than this in this time of year. So it was a beautiful day, clear sky, and I sat on this rock and looked out, and I thought about the last, 2.5 decades of my life, and where I've been, where I'm going, how grateful I am, and how crazy it is, Trex, that if I didn't start lifting weights of all things in my early 20s at the age of 21, that I wouldn't have been anywhere. Like I wouldn't be on this podcast with you, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I was going to
So,
ask if you reflected about, co-hosts that you've mistreated and
mhm.
people you've wronged and things like that. But I'm glad that you had the positive flavor of nostalgia and got to enjoy that. No, actually, it's funny you mentioned that because I had a
I
similar,
call it the rock of regret, actually.
yeah,
So that is, yeah, no, no, 100%.
yeah. But it's funny you mentioned that because I was in a meeting and this kind of there's like this initial icebreaker and the question was like, from someone in your life who, maybe you haven't talked to them in a while, who are 2 people you'd want to talk to again, and they could be alive or dead, but people that you actually knew. And one of the people for me was the person who they didn't get me into lifting, but they saw that I was into it and really kind of nurtured that and
Mm,
really helped that flourish and kind of bloom at a very formative time, right? So I got into lifting essentially independently at the age of 12 because I wanted to be better at football. But I was, if you get into lifting at 12 and you're not a complete idiot and you don't have complete garbage genetics, what that meant was that by the time I was like 14 and a half, I was actually like kind of almost jacked, you know? And so then my high school wrestling coaches saw me in the hallway and they were like, brother, you're under 5'8" and pretty jacked at 14. How long have you been wrestling? And I was like, oh, I've never tried it. And they're like, what are you doing, dude? Like, you live in Ohio, all the things I just mentioned, you're on the team now. Just come. But yeah, I got into wrestling, and then this one wrestling coach was just like, you really, really love this training stuff. And so he pulled me aside when I was, especially like junior, senior year, and we would do our own programming. Like during the
mm.
like team workouts, we would do our own programming. We would meet up at the weight room for a huge number of extra workouts. Like a lot of the guys were training with weights 3 days a week. We were pushing like 5 or 6. We'd come in on the weekends, and yeah, it was just like one of those things where, he, without kind of having his mentorship and like you said, kind of really fallen in love with this stuff. I mentioned in that meeting as I was reflecting, I was like, my whole life would have just gone a fundamentally different direction, and I wouldn't do any of the things I do and any of the things that I love. So I didn't get to sit on a picturesque rock. I was just kind of in a meeting with like, drop tile ceiling made out of like hopefully not asbestos, but either way, we got to the same place, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, an iconic California, midday slash asbestos office. They're basically the same,
Yeah, and
you
me,
know.
me in a faculty meeting, the epitome
Yeah,
of leisure and relaxation. Yeah.
yeah. Me on a Sunday hike through a river in California. It's basically the same. No, 100%.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So Helms, you mentioned worlds. You mentioned you're going to dig a little deeper, push
Yes.
maybe a little bit, see if you get a little bit leaner. Worlds that's in two
Yes.
weeks. Is that out in Boston or is that a different location?
No, it moves around. It
Okay.
definitely is in Boston sometimes. It probably won't be anymore because Andrews retired, and she was typically the one who'd hosted in Boston. So I think it may even. I've heard some rumors it might start going international, which I think would be really cool to see it travel around outside of the U.S.
No, no.
But
This is like the World Series thing, like in baseball. Where we say we are the world champions of baseball, and we've determined that because we have like I don't know how many teams there are, but 98% of them are American, and then we have like one team in Canada. But that's
see,
a
here's the
world
thing, though.
championship.
That was probably true of the WNBF circa 2012 and earlier, but 2019 was the first year they had more international entrants into the WNBF Worlds than after, and now it's 70% international. So
That's awesome.
it's
Yeah.
truly, I think, the only U.S. based and started federation that is actually now a truly international organization. Like ICN is really big, but it almost has no U.S. show, so it's kind of like a Southeast Asia, Australia phenomenon.
Yeah.
And then you have some other places that have world championships. But yeah, so yeah, that'll be in LA. So that's why I'm staying in Cali for the next couple of weeks because we're just
Nice.
gonna take a nice 90-minute flight from Sacramento to Cali on Wednesday, Southwest, quite cheap. Sometimes I've been known to say things that could be interpreted as potentially not always positive as possibly they could be for the US. But right now, I'm enjoying wonderful weather, a beautiful place, and reflecting on it. I am drinking Diet caffeine free Pepsi. That's not an option in New Zealand. So you guys have at least got that going for you. Um, Probably wouldn't trade it for political strife and, murder.
But yeah, but
But
before you say all that
we
stupid
got
stuff
that.
though, dude, soft drink selection in American grocery stores is at an all-time high. We are
Do
killing
you
it
know what?
right now.
Do you know what I had 2 days ago? You'd be happy.
What?
Guess.
Um
Guess.
to make me happy, you would be getting a sugar-free Mountain Dew Baja Blast from a can.
And Lauren Colenso Semple is 100% wrong. She needs to try it, and if she tries it and says she doesn't like it, she is lying to save face. I'm going to tell you that much.
Yeah. So we just talked
It
about
is
this. We just talked about
probably
this.
my favorite diet soda.
No, it's incredible, dude.
I'm,
Mountain
I,
Dew.
I, I'm with you.
Mountain Dew. First of all, the original is incredible. It has cool
Yes.
history, but they came out with all
And it's the
these.
original energy drink that never branded itself as an overt energy drink, but they had the snowboarders. You drink a 12-ounce can of that, it's 90 to 116 like milligrams of caffeine, and it's delicious
Yeah. No, I
depending
mean
on flavor.
Mountain Dew is incredible. They came out with these other
Hmm.
flavors. What is Baja Blast flavor? I have no idea, but it's incredible. But Helms, we were just talking about this 45 minutes ago as we were recording. They came out with Baja Blast pie.
Oh, wow.
So if you go to a Taco Bell, allegedly, you can buy, if you have a crisp $20 bill, you can only buy a whole pie. But apparently, there's a Baja Blast pie, and it has been very favorably reviewed. I've heard people say it's like a mix between a lemon meringue and a key lime pie, and I find that very believable. And I encourage you, when you're still in the type of place. Now, you were talking about California. There's debate about whether or not that's actually America. We won't get into that debate on this particular podcast.
That's
But
probably a good idea.
while you're in that territory of disputed, national boundaries, if you stop by a Taco Bell, which I'm sure you were going to anyway, if I know one thing about Helms, it's that he's just going Taco Bell to Taco Bell. Uh, but yeah, if you're willing to waste some post-show calories, we need reviews of this pie.
I am really a little bit in too deep in the bodybuilding lifestyle, Trex. I didn't have. We went to. I got an ahi tuna salad after the Mayhem, and I was reflecting on, it's a good thing that I don't eat a lot on show day because our plan is to dig a little bit more. And everyone's like, "Oh, so what are you gonna have post show?" And I was like, "Actually, if I get the dressing on the side, no, I can get the dressing. I was on two different divisions. I actually had a pretty high expenditure day. I had to pump up 3 times because I went into an overall. Yeah, I think I'm probably in a 500 calorie deficit if I get this ahi tuna salad. That's great, but it's not too low. I'm carved up, and then I can get like 3 low days before I need to check in with Bert money. So
Yeah,
I dieted on the day that I competed while other people were getting Pizookies at BJ's Brew House.
yeah.
So I'm with you on the Mountain Dew, but I don't think even at the peak of my off season I'd have any desire or probably even enjoyment of that pie, to be honest.
Yeah, I just wish that you could get a slice. I'm not ready for a whole pie. I don't know who I could.
No.
I need to like find 7 new friends that would be willing to take one piece of that. So
We might have at least 7 new friends in the chat. So hey, all of you Iron Culture folks who are here alive, I know the mass uh, office hours are too highbrow for Iron for that, but I know the Iron Culture people, those who, I mean, they used to hang out with Omar and
yeah,
me. That's definitely a crowd who's going to be into that sort of shenanigans. Let us know how it is. I would love to hear if anyone has had it. Maybe we can look at it today or next time, because I'm going to be live next Monday as well with Trex. Let us know. Um, Trex, I do want to give one additional shout out, by the way.
sure, yeah,
The first one is to me for not making any laxative errors.
yeah. It's big.
The old pat on the back. I had you on my shoulder. All right. I didn't overdose on laxatives. I think that was smart. Um, you also notice that this is still the same scar. It's not any worse. So no emergency rooms. No self-induced nonsensical dehydration out of places that you're not supposed to do that through anyway. And that means I successfully did also compete in the open amateur classic physique. And I did get all the way to the pro card, but I was stopped by a really impressive competitor. Big shout out to, I believe his name is Ganesh. I hope I'm not mispronouncing that. I'm going to look it up. No, I'm on the phone with you. I can't. I'm either slaughtering the man's name and being very disrespectful, or I'm giving him the props he deserves. But um, he was a really, really impressive athlete. You actually might know him, Josh Bradshaw.
No, I don't think
Okay,
so.
he's out there with Chris Barakat and out in I think Central Florida doing
Okay.
cool research, but he's also a competitive bodybuilder. He recently turned WBF Classic Physique Pro, but didn't get his bodybuilding pro card. I competed with him in 2023. We both did the Washington, and he is a Classic Pro trying to get his bodybuilding pro card, and I am a bodybuilding pro trying to get my classic pro card. This guy, Ganesh, in the amateurs did both bodybuilding and classic, and both Josh and I won our division in bodybuilding for him and classic for me. Got to the overall, and then we in the overalls were one right after another. So I was like, Josh, I'm weakening him up for you. I'm gonna try to beat him, but if I can't, he should be tired for you. He was not tired. He beat both of us, and he ended up becoming a double pro. Really, really impressive physique. Just bubbly muscles, small waist, really no flaws on him. And yeah, so I am not a classic physique pro, and Josh is not a WBF pro, but we both felt better seeing that the other person got beat, so it made us feel like we still were deserved athletes, and that he's just maybe really good because he is. So anyway,
Yeah.
still a very, very impressive show. But I had a really, really fun time in the evening show. It's hard to peak. It reminded me of like 2010 in these non straight through format shows, like the old school prejudging finals, the typical format of shows. That's kind of gone away in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Most shows are now you get on, you get compared, you do your posing routine, and then you get the awards. And then if you get to the overall, then you kind of have to peak a few hours later. But for me, I was on at like 11 a.m. and then I was on at like 4 and then 5 p.m. Because there were some big classes before the overall. So I had to pump up like 3 times and managing my peak. I think I did about as good as one can, but you just can't look the same at 11, 4, and 5 and get multiple spray tans and not be able to like sit down and put your legs up. So I
Yeah.
had like worse quads, but better glutes and hams later in the day, and then better quads, but worse glutes and hams early in the day. But it was relatively minor. It's something only me and Berto would notice. But anyway, yeah, I was really pleased and honored at a big show like this. There was, I think I placed first out of 6 in the classic open tall
Nice.
class. First
Yeah.
time they've had a classic division at it. And I also got, this is not a silver, even though it looks like it. This is a WBF participation medal. Because I was just outside of the top 5, although I was pretty close when I got judges' feedback. There was multiple votes, so I was almost top 5 in that lineup. So anyway, enough talking about me flexing in speedos. I know this is iron culture, but it's also mass. Trex, how you been, and what's going on in Science Land?
I've been good. Science is canceled, but we persist anyway. We push forward. Um,
I had a feeling that would happen.
yep. No, things are good, and I honestly, I think I am. someone, someone in the live chat said they're looking forward to a TikTok of a homemade high protein cottage cheese Greek yogurt variant of the Baja Blast pie. That is the kind of fitness content I'm ready for. Someone basically said they were glad to hear that my expert laxative protocol worked out for you. The idea being don't overdose on laxatives. So that is my protocol, actually. I do that. There's some bodybuilding protocols I save for contest prep, but that's one I do every day, is just try not to overdose on laxatives. So I'm glad it helped you out a little bit, Helms. But no, you know what? I mean, time is limited. I'm sure you have other rocks to sit on and stoically ponder about life. But why don't we go ahead and dive into some questions here? And I got some that are more dieting related, so I think I'm going to try to restrict our focus to those since they're very much on theme. You're kind of doing that last dig for the worlds in 2 weeks, so got a lot of questions. I was going back to some old questions as well in the submission portal. And by the way, folks, if you want to submit a question for the show, head over to massresearchreview.com/ironculture. You can submit those questions anytime. Of course, another way to do it is just be here in the live chat like the many great folks are tonight. Speaking of which, everyone, thanks so much for supporting the show. Make sure you like, rate, subscribe, review, tell a friend, share it, spam the internet with links. If you really want to support us at the absolute top tier, consider becoming a member of the Mass Research Review community. You can learn more at massresearchreview.com. And of course, make sure you help out our friends over at elitefts.com. Show them some support. If you're in the market for lifting gear or apparel, go to elitefts.com. They've got the best top quality stuff. Use our code MRR10, that's Mass Research Review 10, for a 10% discount off of your order. Now, Helms, getting down to business. A question here about transitioning from a
Mm.
diet to what comes after a diet. So someone said, given that P ratios have been debunked for non-competing lifters, and I would say, well, I'm not going to get into the tangent there. When do you transition from a dieting phase to a weight gaining phase? Like, how do you navigate that process? Do you go, do you do like a kind of a maintenance period? Do you do like a slow gain, then a fast gain? How do you like to approach that? And would your advice differ for someone like you who's in contest shape versus somebody who, let's say they want to lose those last 10 or 15 pounds to look a little better in their t-shirt?
Great question. Yeah, I think a lot of people ask questions related to physiology, but I'd say probably 8 out of 10 times, um, with one out of those two that aren't 8 out of 10 being contest prep competitors, and the other one being, just some people who have a lot of diet experience and are able to be uh, primarily physiology constrained, meaning they have a really, really good handle on their behavioral side of things, not their first, second, third, or fourth diet. And it's definitely not their fourth diet to lose the same weight over and over again, like most people when they say they dieted 4 times. Um, it is behavioral. That's the biggest thing I think about. So, like, let's say somebody comes to me, they've been lifting weights for years, and they want to drop 20 pounds and have that be a permanent loss of 20 pounds. It's a really common thing. Like, I really want to get down to insert some value on a percentage that is probably unrealistic, but ultimately we're going for a look and something that we think is sustainable. And there may be some recalibrating. Um, if they want to lose that permanent last 20 pounds and then maybe just have this cyclical period of I'm going to gain 5 and then lose 5 and each time it looks a little bit leaner, like would be ideal, and doing that over extended periods. That 20-pound loss, I don't like to put a time limit on it because I think that messes people up. And that is probably why there's sometimes cases that people try to do it multiple times. So one of the big coaching points that I have with someone is I'm going, listen, if we're trying to lose this last 20 pounds and have it be permanent or 10 to 15, we want to get a lot of reps in with this also being the body at maintenance that you're eating at. And we want to make sure that it's as effortless as possible to get there. And you don't go into, oh, I'm flipping the switch, it's diet mode. I want to put my nose to the grindstone. I want to cross my I's and dot my T's. And I know it's the opposite. That was why I said it that way, et cetera, because I think that's a mistake. Um, Ultimately, we want to sneak that weight off. We don't want to be inefficient in the time taking to get there. We do want to lose the good clip. We want to have motivating progress initially. We want to do all the things that make sense physiologically, like losing at a faster pace earlier and then losing slower as you get leaner and leaner. But I want to be able to have my client report into me and go, man, the diet's getting kind of hard. And me go, sweet, let's eat at maintenance. Not, no, 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 but I want to push, like, because the direct relationships we see between compensatory binge eating, weight regain, is restraint causes binge eating. That's the cause of binge eating disorder. Um, and that's not the cause. That is the largest correlating factor, I should say, if I want to be an honest reviewer of the data, with binge eating behavior. So I like to basically just take my foot off the gas every time it gets hard, practice maintenance for a few weeks. And then once the person is motivated and wants to diet again, and it doesn't feel hard to do it again. And we just let that take as long as it takes. Um, and then the transition comes quite naturally because we're doing that once more. They've done this multiple times throughout the diet, and it doesn't feel different. And I find that is probably one of the best things that results in successful weight loss maintenance in kind of this archetypal person we're talking about. Um, and I like to just basically get right to a predicted maintenance. And we can be at the very end of the diet, we can be conservative about that, go to an estimated maintenance because we haven't really been there before. That's maybe 10% less. It's not for any reverse dieting, function, building metabolic capacity, anything like that. You may even get a little bit leaner, but look better because, you're kind of refilling glycogen, but you're in a mild deficit, training better. It's just you're closing the deficit. And then if your weight goes down, then I just keep feeding until it doesn't. And then if we overswing a little bit, that's fine. We come back and it's almost assuredly not body fat anyway. And even if there is a little bit of weight gain, but you look better, it's gut contents, glycogen, water, different food choices, all kinds of stuff could be impacting that. So that's how I like to do it, Trex. For a physique competitor, it very much depends upon Actually, it's funny. I said, physique competitors, they don't have to worry about the behavior. They do. First time physique competitors, second, third, fourth, 20th time physique competitors. Ideally, there should be a point where they get to choose and can choose how much weight they put back on after their first show, but or after their last show of the season. But after their first show, typically, unless they come from a background of maybe a disordered eating pattern and being way too lean, which does often happen, what you're going to see is trying to prevent an excessively painful amount of weight regain that happens really fast and actually short circuits the off season. So you're looking at a recovery diet and basically figuring out how do we mitigate the floodgates coming off and this first time experience of not getting satiety signals, um, having cravings because maybe the diet was more restrictive than you've experienced previously, even though we try to make it relatively flexible. And the first time something really tasty hits your taste buds and you want to get back to semi quote unquote normal eating, you decide, you know what, I don't care about anything except tasting that again. And that happens multiple times per week. And how do we constrain that and let your hormones, your mentality, your psychology recover? For me, I did not have that plan, and I put on almost 50 pounds in 2.5, 3 months. And then in my second season, I had the plan, and I put on 40 pounds in 6 months, and that was kind of probably what it could have been if I had a plan the first time. That was like still not great, but way better. And I didn't get like wholly depressed, and I don't think I had clinical binge eating disorder like I probably did in '07. But then 2011, I actually found myself gaining weight too slow. And then ever since 2011, it has been a conscious choice of what is the appropriate amount of weight I should put back on over what time frame based upon my goals. And finding that I have been, oh, I'm a little too lean, I'm not going fast enough, I'm really just wasting off-season time, and I'm trying to find really what is my low end intervention point. But I do think if a competitor can get to a point where they know what their lower level intervention point is, they should be getting there post haste. I don't think you need to binge to get there. I think you should get back to some normal sports supportive habits, which I think should actually be the same in season, off season, and transition, and just choosing different portion sizes, manipulating, you know, basic food, choices, but really kind of having your basic staples. If you get an itch, if you are someone who's that adapted to dieting, like I randomly wanted donuts in my 2019 recovery season. I'm not going to be like, well, I don't eat donuts. I went and got donuts. It happened one day, and then I was like, "Yep, those are donuts. Those are good, but it's not who I am." And I went back to my larger portions of my prep foods plus full fat items and eating off my wife's plate when she was done to that be my recovery plan. Very simple. So I think you will find that there's a huge disparity between competitors on what is an appropriate level leanness in the off season. Um, Something I've noticed is that athletes who are um, very heavy as children or have lost a lot of weight, they might have really good dieting skills, behaviors, and like because they're now competing in bodybuilding, they have the psychology down, but they can't function very well physiologically or put on muscle mass until they're frankly heavier than they would like to be in the off season. Sometimes a dude my size would be 30 pounds over, but like we talked about last time, I can be 15 pounds over stage weight and feel fine. Frankly, I can be 10 pounds over stage weight and feel fine, Trex, but I don't make gains. That's the issue. It's like if I ever hit like 60 and decided I was just going to compete every year and retire, I would just walk around with like just basically side glutes and then just diet for 5 weeks and get on stage.
Yeah.
um, but that's I'm in a stage where that would just be spinning my wheels, and I'm missing a meal away from not getting any sleep that night when I'm like that. So that's not very conducive to the off season, obviously.
Yeah. Now, we talked a little bit about the transition in terms of planning out weight gain, but I do want to ask about two specific struggles that people sometimes have after a diet. Um, One of them I think applies to it applies to bodybuilding competitors in some extent, but I want to get out of that particular
Mhm.
use case or context there. So a lot of people when they are dieting, let's say they want to diet and they're like, I want to lose 30 pounds, and I feel like I'm going to feel better and look better at that weight, and I want to maintain that long term. You often find that people, when they're dieting, psychologically they're cruising. You know, they're a man or a woman on a mission, and they say, I eat these kinds of things, I don't eat those kinds of things, I'm locked in, I'm laser focused. And we got some questions about struggling with after. You know, so
Hmm.
basically you got there and you were super focused on hitting this target. Now you've hit that target, and then the question is, so kind of now what? And people who really struggle, and they're almost confused. They're like, losing the weight is supposed to be the hard part, but now that I'm there, it's almost harder because I don't have that daily motivation. Check the scale. Yes, we're moving in the right direction. It's almost hard to say, cool. Now let's tread water here in perpetuity. So what would you advise to people who are struggling with that element of the kind of post diet transition, which is just that you are now no longer chasing something, you are guarding the thing that you're the dog that caught the car. And you've been
Yes.
so focused on catching it, you didn't really think about what you would do when you did. So what kind of guidance do you give those folks?
Frankly, it is not about what you do after the diet. It's about changing your mentality on the diet. And I can't emphasize how critical this is. And it's why people focus so much. Like you'll hear trainers talk about, I wish I could just get people to focus on performance and let the body composition change happen, or focus on eating healthy and moving more and letting the body composition change happen. I think that's probably too passive of a way to go about it. Um, and it's just too hard in the modern food environment to really have that work. But something close to that, I think, should be done. And it is, I have the explicit goal of losing weight, of being in a deficit, but my goal is to set it and forget it. And literally just figure out a way so that you have the least amount of interactions with monitoring, checking, and the least is still some, to be clear. It might be weighing in 3 times a week. It might be auditing your macros if those weigh-ins aren't going well, but not having a set meal schedule, not being on mission, not feeling like you're goal oriented, and actually opting out of that constant dopamine hit of having a successful diet, which does spur success, because that inherently is a temporary phase, as you know, because you're struggling based upon the question with maintenance. So, what it is essentially setting up a lifestyle in which you are in a deficit and it is as easy as possible while still getting the job done at a reasonable pace with the minimum requisite of monitoring. And the goal is to reduce that down to such a minimal cost that sometimes you forget that you're even dieting. And that is actually how I approach contest prep. I've just been doing this for 20 years, right? So, I mean, the amount of things you can do with fruits, vegetables, and like sugar-free, non-fat Greek yogurt. I had a plate today that was like a dinner size plate that was half carrots, half snap peas, and then I had four sugar-free Chobani yogurts. There's 60 calories per 150 grams, right? They're basically just like pectin, stevia, and like non-fat like milk with everything removed, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's not that flavorful. And I'm sure that you don't have to go that extreme. I'm 2 weeks out from Worlds, right? But I got to eat for 20 minutes, and the energy density of that meal was less than one, and it was 500 calories less. It was 400 something calories, right? If you do that 3 times, you're eating like twice the amount of actual poundage of food that the typical person does, and you're at 1,400 calories. You could do that and still have a normal meal at night. And for most people, you'd be in a deficit. And then just making that what you do, and then going, all right, I'm going to walk to the grocery store. I'm going to park as far away as I can. How do I make my lifestyle conducive to a high step count, lifting weights multiple times per week, and then just setting up a diet that is micronutrient rich, like I said, fruits, vegetables, Greek yogurt, non-fat Greek yogurt, lean meats, whatever fits your dietary pattern, and then just knowing that within those constraints, no matter what I do, I'm going to be in a deficit on a day-to-day basis between X number of 100 calories and up to maybe 1,000, and it can vary. It's fine. I can eat a little more if I'm feeling peckish. I can eat a little less if I'm not. And then I'm going to step on the scale just a couple of times per week and take an average every 2 weeks. And then, cool, we'll see how it's going. And as long as directionality, it's going down, and then just focus on work, that is so much better than someone who is like, oh, I am so on. I'm gonna get my grocery list together. I'm gonna cook everything on Sunday. I'm gonna get my supplement pill rack together. I'm gonna write this perfect workout program for splits and recovery. I'm gonna get my everything together. I know that's fun. I love optimizing everything as well. But if you are someone who struggles with the maintenance phase, you need to stop being in diet land and then what do I do land. And what do I do land is just life. You're no longer the person striving for this goal of weight loss. You can set other goals, but you have to retain the things that you did for weight loss and have them not feel like a thing that you are quote unquote doing, but just it's how you live, which means the diet needs to be how you live. So that is a really tough thing for people to get their head around and do, but it is like quite literally the key, the answer.
Yeah, and that actually, I mentioned I was going to ask about two different contexts, but the way you answered that actually kind of nailed both of them because the other context was we had some questions about. I think a lot of people who diet, they find it to be very daunting and they're unprepared for that daunting feeling of they dieted down and they got to this end point, and it's not just that they're lacking that kind of, like you said, that kind of like dopamine driven day to day winning, 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 winning because the scale's going down. It's not just that they're missing that, but I think a lot of people feel really overwhelmed by the idea of, okay, I got there and now I guess I just do this forever. Um,
Yeah.
and forever is a heavy word in almost all contexts, especially when you feel like you kind of mentally condition yourself to say, I'm on a mission, I'm making these sacrifices, I'm engaging in these goal directed behaviors that ultimately involve sacrifice and involve, some intense effort. And yeah, it can be super daunting if that is your approach mentally to the diet, and then you get to the maintenance period and you say, well, I guess I just kind of do this forever, but with like a few hundred extra calories, which doesn't really what it tells you on the surface is that you're kind of wondering, well, how do I integrate that previous lifestyle and all that comes with it into this? And it seems like the answer is like on a large scale, you kind of don't. You know what I mean? And I think for a lot of people that's a really challenging thing to wrestle with, especially in a post diet state. It's almost easier to accept that on the way in. If you say like, okay, we're not going to diet and then try to cling to different kind of comfort eating things that you associate with, you know, like I said, comfort. Or I think to me that was one of the things that I really missed, or the things that were like really hard to wrestle with when I first like really got into dieting as an adult who had like a fully formed lifestyle that I gravitated toward was like, but how do I reintegrate the kind of like comfort mindless snacking that I used to do on starchy things? And it's like that's kind of just not part of your life anymore. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean you can't have like pretzels anymore, but it does mean that like you don't spend your typical evening sitting on the couch with a large bag of pretzels with some unmonitored amount of mindless snacking that could reach hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of calories. Like, it's not to say you can't sit down with that amount of calories worth of pretzels and work them into, you know, a diet, but that whole idea of when I chill, I snack is kind of just not what you're going to do anymore. And I think that's really hard to wrestle with.
It is, and there is basically a bit of a spectrum from um, complete acceptance of something that needs to fundamentally change in your lifestyle, or some degree of compromise, and that can, and that is what basically acceptance-based therapy is, which is a very successful strategy for weight maintenance. It
Yeah.
was kind of the one hope we had before, like GLP-1s. So if you look at the research on it, but here's an example of what I'm talking about is I think of behaviors that people have. Like one is people who drink soda. They used to have it really tough, but as we just talked about earlier in this episode, it's gotten so much easier because there are so many caffeine-free and sugar-free, calorie-free options. Where I do know some people who are like, no, I'm sorry, the diet versions are just not the same. But honestly, if that's a level of compromise, which I think in that spectrum, it's like there that you can't make, you're just not ready. You're not ready. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like if you can't go to Diet Mountain Dew from Mountain Dew, or if you can't go from Diet Pepsi to Diet Pepsi from Pepsi, if that level of difference or minor taste distinction is the deal breaker, if you can't just put 2 packets of Splenda and almond milk in your coffee instead of getting the Starbucks thing that's 300 calories, if you're not willing to go from 300 to 30 and still get the caffeine hit, still have the flavor of coffee, you're not ready. So, assuming someone is ready, that is a really easy one. But let's say you are the person who has really enjoyed sitting down at night and snacking. And I think that's like most people.
Yeah.
Like what
It's
I
a very
used to do,
comforting thing. Yeah.
it truly is. And we get peckish at night. And it's kind of the thing we do at night. Like, let's watch Netflix and we'll have some chips. Let's go to the movies and have popcorn. It's quintessentially part of like the Western eating experience. And it's hard to let go of. Or let's have a glass of wine at night. There's a many versions of this, right?
Yeah.
And I think there are a tremendous number of approaches that people have tried to get around this. I'm going to skip breakfast just so I can fit it in. Another one that, like for me, I actually got into this because I was bulking for so long that I was having the half-baked froyos, like frozen yogurts at night that were like still 20 grams of protein, but they were like 600, 800 calories, you know? And then when I dieted, I was like, oh, let's have Arctic Zero. I'm like, that's terrible. Then I was like, let's have Halo Top.
Yeah.
But I got so used to having the whole thing. And Halo Top, I can have the whole thing, but there are consequences later for me and everyone around me. So that was off the table. So then I'm like trying to eat half a Halo Top, and that was worse than not opening at all. So what I eventually got to was I'm gonna have skyr or non-fat plain for like Greek yogurt. So I'm having 200 calories, but I'm taking my time. I get a small spoon and I eat it because I had to basically investigate like what part of me really likes this, and it's having something sweet, something that feels like dessert, and that I get to eat for about 20 minutes. So is it ridiculous that I have two non-fat, skyrs that are sweetened with sucralose, with a teaspoon that you normally, like the old lady does her coffee with? Of course. But has it allowed me to still get that sense of comfort? And it is a compromise that probably most people would feel like is over here, but for me, I feel like it's here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So another one is some people it really is just the act of crunching and eating. And then it's like, hey, don't worry, we got snap peas, we got carrots, we got all kinds of things that could work for that. So honestly, but a lot of people don't want to face it in the first place. I think they just don't. They only know how to either cut it out during the diet, which is a time-bound thing, and then, like that goes back to what we were saying previously. No problem. Now I can go back to pretzels, or they just want to figure out, or they're not really willing to accept that it is truly gone. So certain things you have to go like, is this a bargainable option? Is this a compromisable option? And some compromises are actually setting you up for failure because it's kind of like the addict who is not willing to like abstain. Like, okay, well, on Saturdays I'm gonna have a cheat day. And the cheat days get worse and worse and worse, and they become the thing you're thinking about, and you save calories for them, and it can turn into something pretty bad.
Yeah, it's
Um,
like the I only smoke when I drink, but ever since I started doing that, now I drink 4 nights a week.
yeah,
You know?
I've successfully become an alcoholic so that I can smoke more, right? 100%.
Yeah.
So I think whether it's time restricted feeding, whether it is, focusing on food volume, or whether it's investing in diet foods, or whether it's going like, this one I've really got to let go of. And then you just have to look at your goals, talk to yourself, talk to your family members. Sometimes it's a communal behavioral thing that can be an issue. Think about other replacement things that give you a same sense of comfort that might not be that food. If you just like chewing stuff like sugar-free gum, I find that's a little more of like a get through a hard phase of the diet thing that typically
Yeah.
doesn't work long term.
Yeah, you don't want to get
Do you
the like
find,
Minnesota starvation experiment thing where they're like, okay,
yeah,
we allowed
how
you to
much
have
gum can
some
I
gum,
fit
but we didn't think you were going to do 35 packs a day. So gum is now off the
in?
table.
Yes. Yeah. Um, I find the people who have drink related things, it's a little easier. If you want something comforting to drink at night that feels nice, I've had success with people replacing a glass of red wine with becoming like a tea connoisseur at night, or like a decaf espresso. Something that kind of hits that same, because they're not really, most of the time, if the people are really working to commit, it's not that they're trying to get buzzed every night. I mean, if that's still you, that's a big problem in my opinion, getting drunk every night or even a buzz. But if it's I like to have that relaxing drink that puts me in the right head state. Chamomile tea, like something. I don't know what it is for you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the drinks are easier to manage, like switching to Diet Pepsi,
Yeah.
switching from chips to carrots, things like that. But you do have to figure out whether it's bargain and compromise or whether it is acceptance and letting go.
Yeah. I think that's a really good discussion because a lot of times, I think you and I both when we make content about dieting, I'd like to think that we lean more on the empathetic side of the spectrum with regards to the fitness industry as a whole. I don't think we're the tough love kind of folk, but I do think you sometimes do need a little dose of empathetic reality, which is like how you started out and saying like, listen, brother, if you have like hummingbird level sugar receptors such that you're sampling no, 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 no. I need the regular Mountain Dew, not the diet Mountain Dew. Like you're not gonna be ready for this because, like you said, that's like the step 1A minor dipping your toes into what this is gonna take, right? And it's not useful or helpful to pretend otherwise, right? Like you have to be realistic about that. And I think if I could kind of sprinkle in my 2 cents for people, I think you may be surprised what kind of bargaining or compromises you can find, but you do have to do some like actual introspection about like the thing that I keep reaching for that I know I shouldn't be. What is it actually providing me? And so like for example, if you know that you need like a savory, salty meal somewhere in your day, you may find that that has you leaning towards some really higher calorie stuff. But like, man, I recently rediscovered soup, which exists. And oh my God, you talk about savory, salty, especially when the weather gets cold, very comforting kind of food to eat. A million varieties, so it never gets boring. And you can even like really turn them into a bodybuilding meal. So what I've been doing, especially like it gets harder when you're vegetarian. There's no question about that, lower calorie stuff. But man, I've been finding like a really good vegetarian like chicken noodle soup kind of thing that's more like lentil with some noodles, but I've been putting into it some riced cauliflower and some fake chicken. And like it bulks it up. It's where I get a huge bit of fiber for the day. Like, and it really hits that spot of the savory, salty meal that I really feel like I was missing. Like Helms, I used to, there was one time where I joked to you and I said, like, Helms, if I ever eat more than, I think it was 2 protein bars in a day, you know that I'm not doing well and I need help.
I took that to heart because then I saw it.
Yeah, I did get into I was really busy and just didn't have the time and inclination to like bother working out my meals. Dude, I was eating on a regular day 6 protein bars a day, which was not, and like honestly, my gut could handle it, which I was very surprised by. But it was just
Well,
such,
you had a strategy that we talked about, which I was impressed with, because
oh
there are
yeah,
certain protein bars you got to mix and match your sugar alcohols. Yeah, I
yeah.
gotcha.
Well, I'm no dummy. Yeah, I still, even when I'm being lazy, it's thoughtful laziness. So I was doing different protein bars so I wasn't going too heavy on any individual
Yeah,
sugar alcohol.
sorbitol,
And so
maltitol, xylitol. Yeah,
yeah, so I found the mix, and I knew that if I can't have these like double protein bar meals too close together, and I had to get my for the first time in a long time meal timing mattered to me. I was like, I
that's
got to
right.
spread these out, but no, I've been kind of getting back to the drawing board, and yeah, like when you start thinking through what do I really like, a surprising swap that I've been using lately, um, is I would always love like a good dessert or sometimes even more like an ice cream kind of thing. I've been really amazed by how much like just kind of thawing out some frozen mango so that it's still cold and like near frozen. Dude, mango is a very, very delicious fruit. And it's not anywhere near the like snap peas and carrots in terms of calories, but if your indulgence for the evening is some frozen mango that you thawed out, I think you're probably going to end up being in a pretty good spot. So, but
Pineapple, that's a
like
good
you
one.
said, and then at night, yeah, instead of naturally gravitating toward like a glass of wine or a beer, tea is a great option. Decaf coffee is a great option, and I've even found like a lot of times if you're someone who wants to have a glass of wine at night with your spouse, partner, whatever, it may just be that you like just a complex, beverage that isn't just like a sledgehammer over the head, like a diet soda. And you like sharing that, and kind of being in community with that person, kind of hanging out and unwinding. And yeah, tea, decaf, it's a really great way to do that. So I think if you've tried to make that kind of transit, like, listen, I came from like a Midwestern background where you kind of snack all the time and, high calorie foods are part of the deal. Like, Helms, have you ever been to like the true Midwest? Like, they will do things with cheese and sausage you never thought possible.
I have only briefly been there, but I was stationed in the South for a long time. So I was in
Okay.
Georgia for a couple of years. So different, but just as problematic for you order iced tea, which is normal in Cali, and you can specify I don't want sweet tea. But if you not watch that with your eye like a hawk, the assumption refill, boom, you're done.
Oh
They're
yeah.
gonna give you sweet tea.
No, it's
And you
crazy.
and you smack it, and all of a sudden you break the surface tension, and you can see the amounts of sugar in it. It's like completely packed. That solution has as much sugar as can fit in it. Yeah.
No, I was talking to somebody because I live in North Carolina. They like their iced tea around here big time, which is or like sweet tea,
Yes.
which is new to
Oh, it's
me. And yeah, like I've talked to people who work at restaurants where you have to make the whole big batch of it, and they would talk about how like you had a narrow time window where if you didn't get in there with the sugar while the water was still sufficiently hot, it would be so much sugar it wouldn't dissolve into the beverage,
correct.
which is it's kind of insane. So, yeah, I mean, I forget why we got onto the iced tea tangent, but oh yeah, we're talking Midwest and South, yeah.
He's on
But yeah,
Midwest behavior.
in
Yeah.
the South, you'll find gravy in places you never imagined,
Yep.
and things will be fried, and you're like, there's other ways to make this. But yeah, in the Midwest, I remember the first time I had fried cheese curds. It was tailgating an Ohio State Wisconsin football game, and that was a revelation. But it was also like, I don't know if we should be doing. Like, it was one of
I will
those.
say just to give people context, in certain areas of California, foods that are staples in the South and the Midwest are novelty things you get at the county fair.
Yeah, yeah. It's like there's actually
Yeah.
people somewhere in the world that are living this life. Like, let's
This is
try it.
very for you. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I fried cheese curds. The first time I had it, I was like, this is first of all incredible. But then I very quickly was like, just because we can doesn't mean we should. You know what I mean? Like it was quite
Many
a
things in the
quite
States
a
are true
crisis in
because
my
of that.
mind.
Yes.
But anyway, yeah. To kind of bring it home, it's that process. I think you do yourself a disservice if you push it till the end and say I'm going to get in shape and then think about it. And you really do yourself a service if you pretend you're never going to have to wrestle with it. Like if you are living a lifestyle that's, and I don't say this as a pejorative, I say this as the norm.
No.
You live a lifestyle where there's a lot of social eating of high calorie meals, a lot of those kind of potluck high calorie dinners, a lot of snacking at night, a lot of, alcoholic beverages as a means of socializing. You do need to get serious about like just the mathematics of it. Is that kind of lifestyle, if I change none of it, actually going to be conducive to the type of weight loss I'm trying to achieve? In some cases, the answer may be yes. It all depends on the magnitude of those things, right? But for the vast majority of people, especially if they have some pretty substantial weight loss goals or their ideal kind of long-term maintenance body fat is relatively leaner, you're probably going to answer no. This is not all going to work mathematically. And so then you have to say, well, then how am I going to make it work in terms of an actual plan? and what are the things I'm going to skip out on? What are the things I'm going to make compromises or swaps or substitutions? And I think we would both agree that whatever you're going to make a whole cluster of decisions about things that you're just going to say, that's just not part of my life anymore. This one, I have a reasonable swap and I can kind of get what I really am looking for there, which may not actually be the food itself. But I think we can both agree that you need to be very conscious about making sure that you're not, when you're choosing the things that you're just kind of cutting the ties and saying that's just not part of my life anymore, you got to make sure it's not all the social stuff. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, the goal is not to socially isolate yourself. It's to align your identity with your behaviors, and you have to have a very honest conversation with yourself about that. And I will say that an important layer of context is that you don't take away what I call your adult card. Like, I will tell you, if I actually wanted to have donuts more than I wanted to follow my diet for my bodybuilding goals, and it wasn't that 2 weeks post-show instance that I mentioned in 2019 where I was like, you know what? I got to gain fat anyway, and I'd like to have a donut because I randomly have a craving for a donut. What I didn't do that day, and what many other athletes do and people who diet, is go, no, I'm not a person who eats donuts, but they actually want to eat a donut. Like it's okay to have a random craving. That's totally normal. They're like, oh, let me try that, and to be interested in something from a culinary curiosity or just random desire to have a bit of a splurge. Like I want a Snickers bar, I want a Kit Kat. I think the problem is that most people put themselves in an environment where those triggers happen constantly. You know, I just happened to be on a walk in a different area and I went by this new donut shop that popped up in my city and I was on a recovery diet. I have no worry of this turning into a behavior. But if you are constantly going to the drive-through and going to McDonald's to get a salad, like that is something that is going to maybe be like, oh, maybe I want to try that Oreo cookie shake again or something. Or if you're always lingering in the aisle and managing to buy like a Kit Kat, like I get it, the marketing strategies are out there to enforce this behavior. But this is why I think if it fits your macros, Tetris on a day-to-day basis is ultimately not a really good approach. Why I think having some degree of just consistency and patterns in the way you eat, even if you're rotating in 5 or 6 different meals, if you're not someone who's as boring as I am, is important because then you can not have that restriction. Like I said, I think I started my sentence, I didn't complete it. Let's say it was a year from now, Trex. I'm deep into the off season, and I had a craving for donuts. I would just have it, period. Because I know this is weird, but I'm a 42-year-old man. I'm not gonna stop myself from eating a donut if I want a damn donut, right? That's having an adult card. But the important thing is I'm an adult. I'm not a child who eats a donut every 10 minutes because they're there, right? And I don't mean that again as a pejorative, but I do think about how did I eat like when I was a kid? And if every day was Halloween, I would have been fine with that. And how do you get through Halloween? You switch from nerds to chocolate so you can keep eating nerds and chocolate because you're 8 and you just want to live a hedonistic high until you throw up, right? But we're meant to grow out of that to some degree because ultimately we know that's not. We don't even like the way you feel the next day. I mean, as a kid, you're gonna run around, it won't matter. But think about when you were in your 20s and you went to your Halloween party and you still kind of did some of those things. You're in transition. You're like, I feel like trash, and I was drinking. My God, I've never seen bright green throw up at a Halloween party, right? So you get to a point, and when I say eating like adult, I don't mean like a pejorative. I mean you have aligned decisions that are cognitively made, not impulsively made, with your goals. And even people who have no interest in dieting, they don't just eat chocolate all day, right? That we would describe that as a kind of a weird behavior that is probably not being cognitively formed based upon rational decisions. So, yes, you want to create the structure. You want to potentially, like you said, Trex, um, give the long goodbye to certain foods. But let's say you had a full fat Ben and Jerry's every night, and that is one of those behaviors you just completely let go of. And you saw a random, those little Ben and Jerry's minis that they have, which are awesome. You saw a flavor that you hadn't thought about. It's a new one. They released it. You're like, oh wow. You go, no, no, no. I've sworn off Ben and Jerry's. It's not heroin. If you really want it, don't put the restraint on yourself. I would say grab it and then have it at lunch tomorrow. Take it outside of its context. That won't become a normal thing. Like those are things that I still would encourage someone to do if the alternative is feeling restricted and resentful, because that eventually turns into a relapse in my experience. So I
Yeah.
think don't have hard rules unless you truly need them, to be like, if you know there's something that is almost like an addictive substance for you and it's a trigger, fair. But for long-term maintenance, not not having a rule that makes you feel like you don't actually have agency, that you feel self-resent towards, but just having it not be part of your life. Like, I like roller coasters. I go on them every 3 years.
Yeah.
It's fine. You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah.
view it like
Yeah, and it's, you're going to have you may have, I shouldn't say you're going to. You may have that small list of things where you're just like, for me, there's this one thing, I don't touch it. And it's like, hey, if that
that's
list
okay.
stays small, that's kind of a normal thing.
Hmm.
But if that list is like everything that isn't sweet potatoes and chicken breasts, that we've got clinical terms for that, right? Um,
I actually have one of those. I was sitting here thinking, like, I don't have any of those, but I know it's normal to have them. So when there's the perfect connection between childhood, amazing flavor, and something you like, and that isn't aligned with your goals, this can happen. So I have my dad's side of the family lives in Hawaii, and Hawaii has amazing macadamia nuts. It also has amazing Kona chocolate. And if you've ever had the the toasted macadamia nuts covered in Kona chocolate, um, dude, if you get me a tub of those, they're gone by they're done in the time it takes me to eat them, and
yeah,
I just don't do them anymore because my family used to get them for me every time I would go, and I was like 3, 5, 7, 9, and then it became a behavior. I loved it, and it would only happen every 2 years, and then they would send them to us as Christmas presents, and I was a skinny kid, so it didn't matter. So I did this all the way through being a teenager, and then I started going back as a competitive bodybuilder, and I'd be like, that was 4,000 calories that I ate today. You know,
yeah.
in addition to the rest of my day, I just put on 2 pounds of fat today. And that's going to be slowing down my off season a little bit, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I've got a couple, a very small list of things. But yeah, I mean, so you're going to have some of those things. You're also going to have some elements or some context in which maybe it does make sense to have a, in the short term, contextualized, a fairly rigid plan, right? So, for
Okay.
example, I know I'm going to go out to eat tonight, and I know that at this restaurant, I need to pre-register in my mind what I'm ordering so that it's not
Yeah.
this kind of overwhelming, well, live it up a little bit. What are you doing? There might be some peer pressure. There might just be you kind of rebelling against that kind of, like you said, that kind of childish, you're angsty that you're restricting yourself. And so when it comes time and the waiter or waitress comes up to you, you kind of say, screw it, I'll deviate. Sometimes it does make sense to kind of pre-register a plan of, I'm not going to opt out of the social situation, but I'm also not going to leave it up to a last second roll of the dice of how I'm going to make this fit with what I'm trying to do. So take a look at the
Well
menu
said.
beforehand. Maybe you narrow it down to two or three. It doesn't mean you have to go and say, I need you to go and boil me 2 chicken breasts back there. If it touches a pan, there may be oil on that pan and I'm sending it back, right? It doesn't mean you have to do that. It just means you take a look at the options and say, I know ahead of time that there's 2 or 3 things that make sense for me, and I'm going to leave it with one of those, right? So again,
Yes.
there's going to be things you cut, there's going to be things where you compromise, but you got to actually think through this stuff before, not after. Um all right, so a couple like quick ones here. I want to make sure that we have some broad coverage in some of the things we answer. Um,
All right. I'm committed to rapid fire. I'm ready.
this one's easy for rapid fire. So we've been getting a
I
zillion
know it's
questions.
rapid fire. I'm gonna do it no matter what.
Yeah, we get a zillion questions about this. Um, got another one. What is a reasonable step count to be aiming for someone who is not just looking at the epidemiology and saying, oh, here's what it takes to not die soon, but for someone who's actually trying to use this as part of I want to maintain a lowish body weight, maybe lower than I'm used to. This is part of a weight loss or weight maintenance plan. What is the range where you would say, okay, this is enough where we are moving, a meaningful amount throughout the day, but we are not becoming the hamster who is mentally attached to their wheel and is like obsessive about constant movement.
I'd say 8 to 12,000 steps.
So if someone was doing 15,000, would you tell them to bring it down a little bit, or would you kind of just do a little audit of like, how are we getting there?
The second one,
Yeah.
if that is a very, very intentional thing and they're walking around the living room at night and they are walking 5 blocks and carrying a ton of groceries that hurts their arms and messes up their upper body training day, that would be something I'd be like, nah, that's
Yeah.
that's way too intentional. But if they just happen to live in a large city and they have a bike and and they commute and that's just what happens living life, I mean, that just describes pretty much everybody in 1970, right?
Yeah.
15,000 steps. So like that's totally fine.
Cool. All right. I'm going to answer one really quick. So, someone mentioned this was in the submission portal, so I'm not sure who it was addressed to, and I'm not sure exactly what they're referring to. But they say, "So you, this is an accusation of imagine a finger pointing directly at one of us. So you've mentioned that stuff like calorie scales pretty well by weight, even at extremes, but I'm not sure I agree. For example, a 50-kilogram woman maintaining at 2,000 calories, the same as a 70-kilogram woman maintaining at 2,000 calories with similar levels of activity. Seems that calories don't scale that well on the small end of the extreme, in my opinion. So this is the reason I wanted to address this is there is like a big misconception here. So I don't know exactly what I would have said that would give that kind of claim that calories scale well by weight. But here's how I would put it. Fat-free mass is one of the single best predictors of a person's basal metabolic rate. It's the best single predictor. However, it predicts a relatively modest portion of their actual basal metabolic rate. It's not to say it's minimal. Like I said, it's the primary predictor, but it's far from perfect. And you can look at any study that actually measures basal metabolic rate, plots it against fat-free mass. You're going to see something that looks very different from a straight line. You're going to find two people, same exact body size, with substantial differences in their basal metabolic rate. And then on top of that, we have varying activity levels, and you can split that out even more when it comes to activities of daily living or NEAT versus structured exercise activity. For even a quote unquote same amount of activity, if one person's doing some caloric restriction, that very well may impact the energy cost of doing that extra physical activity. We could, even if we wanted to get way into it, start talking about things like economy of movement. Someone doing something for which they're very efficient versus someone doing something that they have very poor efficiency with. So all that is to say, if I ever gave the impression from anything I've said that you can look at a person's body size and predict their caloric expenditure with a high level of precision, that was certainly not my intention, and I think there might be a little game of telephone going on there. Anything to add to that, Helms?
No, I think you crushed that.
Cool. Now, I do appreciate the question. I'm not claiming to have been misquoted, but I think it's really important to nail down the nuances of what is ultimately a very complex thing. Last one here, Helms. This is one we can both relate to. So someone said, I'm a happy plant-based lifter, and I'm often met with a lot of mocking skepticism about it, especially among other lifters. As a vegetarian or pescatarian, what are your favorite ways to stay positive and handle some of the challenging interactions that result from being plant-based in strength training spaces?
I just take my shirt off every time.
There you go. Very rapid
No,
fire.
in all seriousness, I'm not very okay. It does get brought up a lot on the podcast, and talked about it, but I think it's because I'm a science communicator and I'm sharing, and people want to know my diet, and I'm also a competitor and things like that, and I coach people, and I know that sharing my experience is helpful. But in my day-to-day interactions, I don't work very hard to let people know my dietary preferences. Um, I do when I need to. Like if other people are providing food or making food for me, like if I'm going to a conference, I'm in the middle of contest prep, I hate it. I'm like, so I know we're having a meal. Ideally, I would like to have like grilled fish and vegetables because I'm on 1,800 calories and I'm pescatarian. But you know what? If that's not on the menu, that's fine. I can do chicken or I can do, venison, something lean that is, not factory farmed. And then it's like this ridiculous list of stuff. And I'm like, God, I hate being this person
Yeah.
because I don't want to put on anyone. And I don't want my ethical choices and my personal choices of deciding to compete in competitive starvation for no reason really, other than that's just the way I've chosen to express meaning in my life, to impact other people and inconvenience plans or make them choose a different restaurant. Like, I don't like to be that person.
Yeah.
So, um, I find with my friends and whatever, like, there's very few restaurants, at least in most countries. It is definitely different in certain parts of the world, but in the West, it's not that hard to be pescatarian or vegetarian and just order things and just go about it. Um, and if your friends are like noticing what you're eating and actually constantly commenting on it, you're going to tell I come from a family of therapists. I would actually find one of them who you think is most reasonable and actually sit them down and be like, it actually does kind of bother me that every time I eat a meal with you guys, I have to defend, what I'm doing when I'm just living my life. I find it disconnecting and I think it's a negative for our relationship. Um, and I know it's probably just a joke for you guys. It's unintentional, so I'm not mad, but it'd be cool if we could change this. That's the kind of conversations I have in my life. I know that can be very jarring for bro culture, but I'm 42 and I don't have time to play and waste time with people. I'm going to be real with them. So
Yeah.
that's what I'd recommend. I'm not sure how useful that's going to be in your scenario.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I was thinking through this because like this almost never comes up for me.
Yeah.
And like you said, there are some occasions where, in some kind of gathered setting, especially with people I don't know very well, if it's like work related or something, people will be like, "Hey, we're doing this thing. If you have any dietary restrictions or whatever, put them on the sign up form or whatever." And I'll put, yeah, I'm vegetarian, and it'll be funny because people are super accommodating, but they also, I think, sometimes kind of mentally just put you in the bucket of like dude with dietary restrictions. So I've had people
Yes.
who very well intentioned, and they'll come up to me and be like, "Hey, we set aside something gluten free for you over there." And I like appreciate it, and I don't know how to break it, to this particular group of people that I'm not gluten free, and that
Mhm.
I didn't just sign up for the starter pack of dietary restrictions. But it's very
Well,
kind. It's people who are going out of their way to make sure that you feel embraced and welcome and
yes.
things like that.
It's well-meaning for
Oh
sure.
yeah, absolutely. But um, but yeah, it's kind of one of those awkward things though. Like you hear about the situations where like someone mispronounces your name wrong the first time you meet, and then for like 7 months that's just your name, and then eventually you're like, hey, just so you know, it's kind of one of those things now where I'm like kind of gluten free by default. I think because I just the first day didn't like speak up and say that because I didn't want to be like a jerk. I was just like, oh, thanks, that's very kind of you. But yeah, I think while you are very much, as you put it, kind of the therapist in those situations, or you have some of those vibes of like, hey, let's sit down and talk this out. I was trying to think of why this never happens to me. And it could be just part of my environment, that the area I live in, there's not a tremendous amount of that kind of like, you know, almost like subtle bullying over over being a
Yeah.
vegetarian. But I also think, much like you said, you're considerably older than me, but I'm still at an age, by by a wide margin. I'm still at an age where I also don't have time for that kind of stuff, and I think I've
You're
without
you're spiritually older than me, and
that's true.
regardless of your actual biological age, yeah.
Yeah, and probably my biological age too, if we got one of
I,
those
I didn't
kits.
say it. I let you do it.
But I think I've probably just self-selected out of those types of social circles, not as like an intentional thing. None of the people I associate with regularly, other than my wife, are vegetarians. So I'm not saying if you're not a vegetarian, I don't hang out with you. That's essentially almost virtually opposite from my reality. But if I was in a setting where people were of the temperament or inclination to like really hassle me about what I'm eating, that just doesn't seem like a fun time for me to a fun way for me to spend my time, of just like, I'm going to defend this, and instead of having a nice meal, we're getting into like let's um let's really interrogate the ethics-based decision by which you decided to order that at lunch. That's not how I want to spend my time, you know? So
Nope.
I think the Helms way is better. My way is curmudgeonly and, if taken to the extreme, socially isolating, which the theme of today's episode is don't be socially isolated by choice. But yeah, I think, first of all, it shouldn't be too terribly hard. You probably don't do yourself any favors by announcing it all the time if it's not actually relevant or necessary. So make sure you're not contributing to it, I would say. But then also, yeah, you kind of have to make that decision of, if it's really happening and pervasive enough that, that it bothers you, you're going to have to either have that talk or self-select out of that particular social environment. So it's totally up to you. But it's one of those things. I'm like you, Helms. I'm very flexible about it. You know, I feel a particular way about me eating meat regularly, but like if my parents live in the area now, if they come by, they're eating meat. We order like Chinese food or whatever, and if they don't finish their meal, I started eating a vegetarian diet because I was studying a lot of like Buddhist ethics and Buddhist psychology, and Buddhist monks would as I understand it, I could be an idiot and have gotten wrong information, but as I understand it, they would often eat meat on occasion because they would kind of go around with their bowl and kind of take what was given to them. And if it was in the bowl, they'd say, well, it doesn't do us any good to just throw this out, right? Like the life has been taken at this point. It wasn't taken for me. But yeah, I'll do that same kind of deal with my parents where I'm like, if
100%,
we're going
dude.
to throw out the leftovers or I eat it, I'm just going to eat it, you know?
Yeah. So every time a restaurant accidentally brings me something with meat when I don't order it, I let them know because I think that's a mistake that should be pointed out.
Yeah.
But I eat it
Right.
because it's going to go in the trash and then it's wasted. So
Yeah.
yeah, 100%.
But
No,
yeah, so I think
I
we,
think you did a good job with that question, man. Yeah.
yeah. All right. So hopefully that was useful to some people. Helms, I think that probably does it for tonight. We covered a lot of ground, very diet oriented. Hopefully it didn't make you hungry as you're doing your final dig for the Worlds in 2 weeks. If nothing else, it may have kind of helped you revisit how you did this whole thing, and kind of reinforced your approach, because it seems like you're holding pretty steady there, doing well. I didn't see you trying to sneak any candy bars during recording, which means you're good to go. Oh,
Quest bar.
oh, Quest.
Definitely post workout. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
It's 170 calories. It's the apple pie one.
Apple pie. That sounds lovely. Oh man, we used to go
Yeah.
by Helms. Speaking of when we're talking about like what are the things you bargain, what are the things you leave behind. Me and my buddies, after our football games in high school, we would go to McDonald's,
Ah, yeah.
and
McDonald's apple pie.
what we would do is we would often go really late at night at one of the like 24-hour ones. And there was this one guy who worked the drive-through, and he was like really, we love this guy. But if we came at the right time, he'd be like, listen, I got like 40 apple pies back here that I don't think anybody's going to want. And like at a certain point, we can't just leave the apple pies there for 7 days straight, right? So, dude, we would go to the 24-hour McDonald's at like 2:30 in the morning and just load. We'd be like, brother, whatever you got back there, we will give you a fixed amount of money. This is the amount of money we will give you. You give us what makes sense to you. Like we were basically at a McDonald's drive-through at 3 a.m. doing some kind of like open market bartering
Swap
system.
meat.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
just
love
like,
it.
listen, here's what we can do. You tell us what you can do. Let's try to make something work here. And Helms, I think that's something I just had to let go. Was the eating 7 apple pies at
That
3 in the morning.
that one's tough to compromise on and find a version of. No, I agree.
Yeah.
And that's a great example of behaviors that probably should change if your goal is to live a lean life. Yeah.
Or if your goal is to live a life that continues.
Yeah, the one that doesn't end at 45.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. You probably, be
From
asleep.
trans fat clogged articles
Yeah. Be
are
asleep
just
at 3 a.m. is the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is, if you are going to have a snack at 3 a.m., maybe not, 4
seven
McDoubles
apple pies.
and 7 apple pies. That was my standard post game meal, was 4 McDoubles, and then as many pies as we could get our hands on. So times have changed, Helms.
They have the good
Yeah.
old days.
All right, man. Anything you want to say to the good people before we go?
No, just thank you for tuning in. It's been a pleasure. Make sure to please support the show. 5-star rating, thumbs up, subscribe, tell a friend. Do you need lifting gear? I know where to get it. Elite FTS. Hold on. Don't go there yet. Do you want a code to get a discount? MRR10. Oh, what does MRR stand for? Mass Research Review. Do you want to support us even more? Oh, guess what? Go to massresearchreview.com, consider subscribing because you will get all this degree of science-based content going back till 2017 and going on in the future in perpetuity and only getting better because myself and Trex were aging like fine wine, becoming connoisseurs of additional research. That's only true in Trex's case. I'm just digging my trenches even deeper and becoming more of an expert in the things that I don't need to drill down into more, and that's the iron game. But if you love that, I love you. Please join. Thank you for listening.
All right. And Helms, I think you committed. You're going to be back next week.
See you in a week.
Awesome. Then after that, as Helms is going around winning world titles, we'll have a couple interview episodes and things of that nature. But that does it for tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for the continued support. We will be back in 7 days. Everybody take care.